Nobody warns you about the second trap. The first trap everyone talks about: the debt, the mortgage, the car payments, the credit cards that arrived in your mailbox like invitations to your own slow execution. People write books about the first trap. They make podcasts. They hold seminars in hotel conference rooms with bad carpet. The first trap is famous. But the second trap, the one that waits for you specifically at 50, the one disguised as a reward, the one wearing the face of everything you worked for, that trap has no books, no seminars, no warning label. The second trap looks like success. It smells like success. And when it closes around your wrist, it does so with a handshake and a smile and the sound of polite applause in a conference room on the 14th floor. This is the story of that trap. And this is a story of the men who were smart enough, or broken enough, or just barely awake enough to look it in the eye and say no. Most people never do. Most people say yes. They say yes because 50 years of conditioning trained them to say yes. They say yes because their fathers said yes. They say yes because the alternative, standing in that office, declining the title, declining the salary bump, declining the corner office with the view of the city, the alternative looks like failure. It looks like weakness. It looks like surrender. But here is the hidden truth that this documentary is going to lay out for you, piece by piece, like evidence on a detective's table. Saying yes to that promotion at 50 is not the reward at the end of the tunnel. It is the tunnel collapsing on top of you. And the men who figured this out, the ones who walked away, who said thank you but no, who disappeared into something quieter and stranger and more alive, those men are the ones this story is really about. Let us go back, not to your office, not to your life. Let us go back further. Let us go back to where this entire machinery was built, and by whom, and why, and what it was designed to do to you. Because none of this is an accident. Picture a factory floor in 1952. The war is 7 years in the past. The men who survived it have come home, and they are hungry in the particular way that men are hungry when they have spent years living close to death. They want normalcy. They want a house. They want a wife, children, a car in the driveway, a Saturday afternoon with no one shooting at them. This hunger is real. It is earned. It is human. And the machine was waiting for it. American industry after the Second World War was the most powerful economic engine the world had ever seen. The factories that had been making tanks and aircraft and rifles were retooling. They were making refrigerators now, washing machines, lawn mowers, television sets, automobiles in colors that had never existed before, turquoise and coral and ivory white, colors that said abundance, colors that said you are not in a foxhole anymore, colors that said you have made it. But there was a problem, and the problem was psychological. A man who lived through the Depression, who watched his father lose everything in 1929, who grew up eating thin soup and wearing shoes with cardboard soles, that man did not spend money easily. He saved. He repaired things instead of replacing them. He was deeply, instinctively suspicious of debt. The word debt to a Depression-era man was not a financial concept. It was a physical sensation, like cold water rising around your ankles. So the machine had to solve this problem. And it did. It solved it with one of the most sophisticated psychological operations in human history. It solved it not with guns or laws, but with meaning. They tied your identity to your consumption. A man in 1953 did not buy a new Chevrolet because he needed transportation. He bought it because the man next door had a new Chevrolet, and if he did not also have one, he was saying something about himself, something shameful. Something about his value, his ambition, his adequacy as a provider. The purchase was not about the car. The purchase was about who you were, and suddenly, saving money was not prudent. Saving money was suspicious. Saving money meant you were not confident in your own future. It meant you were afraid. Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, had been working on this problem since the 1920s. He was not an economist. He was not a businessman in the traditional sense. He was something more dangerous. He was a man who understood that human beings do not make rational decisions. They make emotional decisions and then construct rational explanations afterward. He called what he did public relations. What he actually did was rewire the American psyche. Bernays ran a campaign for the American Tobacco Company in 1929. He wanted to get women to smoke publicly, which was considered scandalous at the time. He did not run advertisements about the quality of the cigarettes. He hired women to march in the New York City Easter Parade, smoking cigarettes, which he told the press were torches of freedom. He connected cigarette smoking to women's liberation, to autonomy, to defiance. He made the cigarette a symbol of identity. It worked. Within a year, female tobacco sales had risen dramatically. Now apply that same logic, that same technique, to the office, to the title, to the promotion, to the corner office, to the company car and the expense account and the business class flights. These things were repackaged using the same Bernays playbook. They were not compensation for your time and your labor and your health. They were proof of your worth. They were the visible evidence that you had competed and won, that you mattered, that you were not, in the deepest fear of every man who ever lived, invisible. This is where the promotion trap was born. Not in a boardroom, in a lab, in the mind of men who studied human psychology the way a locksmith studies a lock. Not to protect it, but to open it. And now here you are, 50 years old, and the trap is open. Let us describe the man this story is about. Not a specific man, a composite, a type. You will recognize him because you may be him, or you may have sat next to him in a meeting room and sensed something behind his eyes that he could not name. He is good at his job. He has always been good at his job. Not flashy, not political in the backstabbing way that some people play office life, but competent in that deep, quiet way that organizations actually run on. He knows where the bodies are buried, metaphorically. He knows which processes actually work and which ones are theater for the quarterly review. He has institutional knowledge that would take a replacement 7 years to accumulate, and the organization knows this, even if they would never say it out loud in those terms. He is, in the language of the machine, an asset. He is also 50 years old, and 50 is a strange country. At 50, the body begins to send messages that it did not send at 35. Not catastrophic messages, subtle ones. The back that complains after the long flight. The sleep that comes harder and leaves earlier. The recovery from stress that takes a day instead of an hour. These are not signs of failure. They're signs of a biological entity recalibrating, asking for different inputs, signaling that the terms of the deal need to be renegotiated. But the machine does not care about the signals from his body. The machine has a different set of metrics. At 50, he is at the peak of his leverage. He costs less to retain than to replace. He is too experienced to micromanage and too embedded to easily remove. He has, through 2 decades of work, accumulated something that cannot be manufactured quickly. He is trusted by clients, by colleagues, by the vendors who call him by his first name and mean it. And so the machine, the organization, the system chooses this moment. It offers him the promotion. Director, vice president, senior vice president. The title varies, but the structure is identical. More responsibility, more people to manage, more visibility in the organization. A salary increase that sounds substantial until you calculate the effective hourly rate against the additional hours the title will require. A seat at the table where the big decisions are made, which turns out to mean a seat at a table where you are responsible for implementing decisions that were already made somewhere else. The promotion is not a reward. The promotion is a renegotiation of your contract, and the terms are worse. Here is how the mechanics work, and pay attention to this part, because this is the part they never show you in the glossy package they slide across the desk. When a company promotes a 50-year-old into a senior leadership role, they are solving 3 problems simultaneously, and only one of them is the problem you think they are solving. Problem 1, the one they tell you about, is leadership capacity. They need experienced people in senior roles. Fine, true, that part is real. Problem 2, the one they do not mention, is a retention problem. You are, at 50, with your level of skill and institutional knowledge, theoretically capable of leaving. You could consult. You could go to a competitor. You could, in the most dangerous scenario from the organization's perspective, simply stop. Simply opt out. The promotion is a golden handcuff, elegantly designed. The new salary creates new lifestyle expenses. The new title creates new identity attachment. The new role creates new complexity in your life that makes leaving feel impossible. You are now managing a team. You are now responsible for their careers. You are now in the org chart in a way that makes extraction complicated and painful. You have been anchored. Problem 3 is the most cynical, and it is the one that took me the longest to see clearly when I started mapping this pattern. At 50, a man in a senior individual contributor role, a man who knows what he knows and does what he does, and has stopped needing external validation to feel confident in his own competence, that man is quiet. He is effective. He does not need much managing. He is, from a pure organizational dynamics perspective, slightly outside the system's control. He has found his center of gravity, and it does not depend entirely on the organization's approval. The promotion fixes this. A newly promoted senior executive at 50 is suddenly insecure again. He is in a new role. He has new things to prove. He has subordinates watching him and superiors evaluating him, and peers competing with him. He is, once again, in the anxiety loop that the organization can manage. He is hungry again. He is dependent again. The machine has always known that a hungry man is a manageable man. Go back further. Go back to the company towns of the 1890s. George Pullman, the railroad car manufacturer, built an entire town in Illinois for his workers. He called it Pullman. He owned everything in it: the houses, the church, the library, the market where his workers bought their food, the water system, the gas lines, the sewage. His workers did not live near the company. They lived inside it. Every dollar they earned flowed back to Pullman through rent and groceries and utilities. They were paid in wages, and they paid those wages back in living expenses. And when the wages were cut in 1894, but the rents were not, the workers had nothing. No savings, no escape, no alternatives. They called it a model town. It was a total system of control. The modern corporation does not own your house. It does not need to. It owns something more portable and more powerful. It owns your identity. And the promotion is how it deepens that ownership at the exact moment, at 50, when you are closest to breaking free. Because here is what 50 actually is when you strip away the machine's narrative about it. 50 is not the beginning of decline. 50 is the beginning of clarity. The neuroscience on this is interesting, and we will come back to it. But think about it experientially first. At 30, you are running on anxiety and ambition and the desperate energy of a man who does not yet know who he is. At 40, you were managing the gap between who you thought you would be and who you actually turned out to be. That is painful. That is the decade of quiet reckoning, of dreams deferred and recalibrated. But at 50, something shifts. The noise gets quieter. The opinions of people who do not matter start to matter less. You have buried people you loved, which changes your relationship with time in a way that no book can fully describe until it happens to you. You have failed at some things and survived the failing. You have succeeded at some things and noticed that the success felt different than you thought it would. You have, through sheer accumulated experience, developed a bullshit detector that is finely calibrated and rarely wrong. You are, at 50, more yourself than you have ever been. And the machine looks at this clarity, at this hard-won self-knowledge, at this man who is finally starting to hear his own voice over the noise, and it says, "We need to talk about your future here." The men who say no to the promotion are not, as the conventional story would have it, men who gave up. They are not men who failed to close the deal or who lacked the confidence to step up. The conventional story is designed to keep other men from following their example, so the conventional story has to make them look like losers. This is standard operating procedure. Discredit the people who escape. Make their escape look like failure. Keep everyone else in line. The men who said no are, in the genuine story, men who did the math. Not just the financial math, though the financial math is damning enough on its own. Take a hypothetical man. He is making $120,000 a year in a role he knows well. He works, in reality, about 45 hours a week. The promotion offers him $150,000 a year. It will require, in reality, 60 to 65 hours a week. He is being asked to trade 15 to 20 additional hours per week for $30,000 additional dollars per year. Work that out. $30,000 divided by roughly 800 additional hours per year. He is selling those marginal hours for $37.50 each before tax. After tax, in a high-income bracket, closer to $22 or $23 per hour. $22 an hour for the hours of a 50-year-old man who has spent 25 years becoming exactly who he is. But the financial math is almost not the point. The financial math is just a translation of something deeper into a language the machine understands. The deeper math is about time, about what kind of time, about what the hours of a 50-year-old body and mind are actually for. There is a Japanese concept, and the word is ikigai, but let us not get lost in the Japanese branding of it, because the idea is older and simpler than any single culture. The idea is this: there is a thing that you do that feels like breathing. Not work in the sense of effort against resistance, but work in the sense of a river finding its bed. There is a thing that makes you more alive at the end of it than you were at the beginning. There's a thing that uses the specific, unrepeatable combination of who you are, what you know, what you have survived and loved and lost in a way that nothing else can. Most men never find it because the machine never gives them the space to look. The promotion seals that space permanently because the dirty secret of senior leadership, the thing that every man who has held a VP title for 3 years will tell you in quiet honesty over a drink at the end of the conference, is that the role is not actually about doing your best work. The role is about managing other people doing work that is sometimes good and sometimes mediocre and occasionally disastrous, and doing it through meetings and performance reviews and budget cycles and organizational politics that have the texture and the meaning of wet cardboard. The man who was brilliant at the thing is now managing people who are sometimes brilliant at the thing. And the distance from the thing grows every quarter, and the meetings multiply. And the strategic retreats happen twice a year at a hotel near an airport. And somewhere in year 2 or year 3, he finds himself sitting in one of those airport hotels at 11 at night, his laptop open to a presentation he has revised 4 times in the last 2 days, and he has the specific, hollow feeling of a man who has traded something irreplaceable for something that looked, from the outside, like everything. He stares at the wall of his hotel room, not the wall of his apartment at 3 in the morning, which would at least have the intimacy of his real life around him. The wall of a hotel room near an airport. A wall that belongs to nobody. That is the end of the trap. That is what is waiting behind the handshake and the applause. So what do the men who walk away walk toward? This is the part the financial independence community gets half right and half wrong. They get the mechanics right, the saving, the simplification of expenses, the reduction of lifestyle inflation, the building of income streams that do not require trading hours directly. These things are real and useful and deserve the attention they get, but they miss the deeper architecture. Walking away from the trap is not primarily a financial move. It is a philosophical move. It is an act of self-archaeology. It requires that you do something most men have not done since they were 22, which is to sit in the silence of your own life and ask, without the machine's framing, without the comparison to your colleagues or your neighbors, or the version of yourself you imagined at 25, you have to ask what you actually want. Not what you are supposed to want. Not what would make your father proud. Not what the LinkedIn algorithm would endorse. What you want. What makes the specific instrument of who you are resonate at its correct frequency. For some men, this is a craft. Woodworking, in the old, precise, joints that last a century sense. Cooking in the way that a man who spent 30 years eating airport food cooks when he finally has Tuesday afternoon free. Writing, not content, not thought leadership. Actual writing, the kind where you sit alone with a blank page and something true comes out. For some men, it is land. A piece of ground with a vegetable garden and a fence that needs painting and a neighbor whose name they actually know. For some men, it is the teaching of something they know deeply, not in a corporate training context, but in the simple human transaction of an older person showing a younger person how something actually works. Not managing, teaching. The difference is the difference between pushing a man in a direction and standing beside him while he finds his own way. The men who said no to the promotion at 50 did not retire. Most of them did not stop working. They stopped letting the machine define what work meant. They stopped allowing the machine to tell them that the meeting was more important than the morning. That the quarterly review was more important than the afternoon with the child who will be grown before the next quarterly review arrives. They opted out of a specific kind of business that the machine had taught them to wear, like armor, busyness as proof of importance, busyness as evidence against the fear that without the role you are nobody, that the title is the man, and without the title there is no man. They called that bluff. And what they found on the other side of it was not emptiness, not the void, not the existential crisis the machine had always promised was waiting for anyone who stepped outside its frame. What they found was simpler and stranger and harder to explain than any of the machine's narratives. What they found was themselves. Not a self that was defined by output or compensation or organizational chart position. A self that was prior to all of that. The self that existed before the first job interview. The self that knew what it loved before it learned what it was supposed to love. The self that the machine had spent 3 decades carefully burying under layers of aspiration and anxiety and identity constructed from titles and salaries and corner offices. That self had been waiting, quietly, patiently, the way water waits behind a dam, not angry, not desperate, just present, with the full and absolute confidence of something that knows its own nature. At 50, the dam starts to crack. The smart men, the ones this documentary is really about, they do not wait for it to break. They open the gate. They say no to the promotion not because they have given up, but because they have finally, after 50 years of noise, heard something more important than the machine's voice. They have heard their own. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, maybe in an airport hotel room, maybe in a conference room waiting for a meeting to start, maybe staring at an email with the word congratulations in the subject line, if you are sitting somewhere and something in this story feels less like a documentary and more like a message, then pay attention to that feeling. Because that feeling is not weakness. That feeling is not fear. That feeling is the sound of the dam beginning to crack. And the question is not whether you are brave enough to walk away. The question is whether you are brave enough to find out who you are when you do.